Welcome to Our Stories Matter, Campus Voices, civil engagement in an era of division. This season, we're asking one urgent question. How do we engage across deep differences on college campuses without shutting each other down?
I'm Susie Hess, here with my co-host, Miri Barr-Halpern.
At a time when conversations can turn tense, polarized, or silent altogether, we're slowing things down. We're practicing something harder than arguing, listening. In this season, we interview leading scholars, journalists, filmmakers, and legal experts who share practical tools for navigating difficult dialogue, including confronting the rise of Jew hatred on campus.
This isn't about avoiding difficult conversations. It's about developing the relational courage to stay engaged in them. It means showing up with curiosity, respect, and a willingness to listen, even when it's uncomfortable. Join us as we explore what it takes to remain in the conversation during a time of deep division.
Welcome back to Our Stories Matter. In our current climate of intensive division, is it even possible for two women from totally opposing sides of deeply painful conflict to build up profound healing friendships? Today, we are so honored to be joined by Heidi Bash-Herod, a Jewish women's rights activist, and Neda Higuera, a Palestinian-American lawyer.
This was an incredibly emotional, honest, and painful episode as they both forged an unlikely and beautiful sisterhood in the aftermath of October 7th. Instead of trying to change each other's minds, they leaned into genuine curiosity to hold each other's pain. I mean, it was a tear-jerking masterclass for Mary and me on really thinking about dropping the oppression Olympics to grant all of us human dignity. So grab some tissues and get ready for a truly powerful episode.
Maya and Frannie, thank you so much for being with us today. And I just want to start with a general question for both of you, whoever wants to answer first. What actually got you into journalism and how did you end up at a free press?
Thank you so much for having us. I can go first. I actually wasn't really ever set on becoming a journalist. And actually, which is relevant for our conversation today, I was a student at Columbia and I was outspoken about the issues I cared about, which were free speech and Israel and anti-Semitism. And that kind of had a lot of social repercussions, sometimes academic repercussions. And I just wrote a cold email to Barry Weiss, who at the time had just left the New York Times. She had started this little blog. And really it was out of desperation. I was like, you have to get me out of here. I'm so miserable. And so then I just graduated a little bit early and was her assistant and a number of other jobs. But I would say more than wanting to be a reporter, I wanted to be part of building something that was meaningfully counteracting what I was seeing on campus. And that's really what brought me to the Free Press. And then once I was in the room, I realized like the most effective thing that I think I can do is try and report the stories that I was seeing when I was in school. So that's kind of how I got here.
And my pathway is a little bit different. So I graduated from college majoring in public policy, thinking that I was going to go into a career, maybe DC at a think tank, something like that. Any of my friends at the time who graduated with that same public policy degree, they were going into consulting, going into finance, going into all of these various, and I kind of felt different. I didn't know it, the consulting world, it didn't call to me. I didn't feel like it was going to really highlight my skill sets. And then I started to think, hey, like all of my favorite classes in school were these small little journalism seminars I took just because they were fun. I didn't do them thinking that was a career path. I did it just because I always had a great time. We would always get to go out into the world and write interesting things. And the classrooms always felt like baby newsrooms. And so I decided, you know what, let's give this journalism thing a shot. Let's see what happens. So I actually ended up moving to Des Moines, Iowa after college, and I worked as a breaking news reporter at the Des Moines Register. And I loved it there. I loved my colleagues there. At the same time, I was also witnessing a journalism industry in decline. So within 6 months, I survived 2 rounds of layoffs, and then I got furloughed for a week. And I thought to myself, I don't know if journalism, I love this job. I love what I can do with it. I love going out in the world and talking to people and writing and all of those aspects of the job. But I don't know if I can survive in this industry. And it just so happened that the week I got furloughed, Barry Weiss launched the Free Press. And I thought, here I am at kind of this old guard journalism institution, one I still had a lot of respect for. but I felt like it wasn't able to innovate and meet the moment. And here's this example of something new popping up and trying to innovate. Let me see what that's about. And that was how I initially reached out to the Free Press and eventually made my way there.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. I'm curious then, from when you both were in school to now, do you feel like campuses are becoming less tolerant of different viewpoints? I mean, what do you both think?
Well, I actually pulled up FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. They do this amazing survey every year, the Freedom on Campus report. And I pulled up a couple little tidbits from that for our conversation today, because I think they give some really startling insight into discourse on campus. So they surveyed 257 different schools, and 166 of those schools got an F rating on speech climate, according to FIRE. On top of that, 1 in 3 students endorsed some kind of violence, even if rarely, but some kind of use of violence to quell campus speech or stop a campus speaker who they disagreed with. So to me, those are really startling statistics. And we've been seeing this for the past few years. Obviously, when Maya and I were in college not too long ago, we witnessed this. But I do think we're seeing an environment that, even though there's more light on it, it is in some ways getting worse.
Yeah, I mean, you think about what happened in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, which was on a campus, doing what he did for most of his career, which was having a tent pitched at a campus, having students line up and having, debate. And regardless of what you think about his politics, people's reaction on campus to that, to his murder, was really startling and telling. There were students celebrating. There were students saying, he kind of had it coming because of the things that he was saying. And this was someone who, again, regardless of if you agree with him politically, was trying to do what I think we all believe is important, which is just debating with people in public in the campus square as respectfully as possible. And so people's reaction to that, I think, is really, really telling about the moment we're in.
I think it's fascinating what you're saying, Maya, because I had a very similar reaction. The day of his murder, I actually gave a talk, and I used that as an example of how, as a society, we became more numb to violence in general. And someone from the audience started yelling at me that it's like, well, excuse me, he deserved to die. He wanted people like me dead. And I was saying, hold on, like, you're still justifying a murder. It doesn't matter if you agree with him or don't agree with him. It's a person who was killed. And that idea of like, how is a society, and I wonder, back to what you were saying, Frannie, as well, like as campus, almost like this microcosmos of what we're seeing in the larger community, is terrifying to me.
Yes. I mean, I think not only is it that these students are the next teachers, doctors, lawyers, publishers, moms, dads, even like when you look back in basically any history book, all of these movements started on campus. The Free Press, we've written a lot about how the kind of first signs of Nazism were really picking up in the university. And so the idea, like when I would kind of scream my head off at campus and was told, like, every like young kid goes through a phase where they hate authority and they think it's acceptable to spew these ideas, and then they'll have to, graduate and get a job and pay taxes and have kids, and that'll wash away. And what we're seeing is that is just not happening at all. And to the contrary, those people are rising the ranks in a really serious way that we have to contend with.
So how do you think then, if you take all of this together, how do you think that media coverage, traditional outlets or newer independent platforms shape the way that people understand what's actually happening on campuses to the point of everything you're talking about, both of you?
Well, I think one thing to consider is the stories on campus that don't get as much coverage in answering that question. And what comes to mind for me is actually the self-silencing that many students feel within the classroom. It's not just the big protests that do end up getting a lot of national media coverage. It's the fact that what you're not reading about is the student who goes to their history class, their politics class, whatever class it is, and doesn't feel comfortable speaking up and sharing their perspective in the classroom. And that's really where the loss in ideological diversity, that's really where the loss in the university being the marketplace of ideas, that's where I think we're really seeing it most profoundly. And that's something that media, especially the mainstream media, isn't really covering. And I think in part it's because there's some perhaps ideological confirmation that, oh, you know what, that viewpoint that somebody might have expressed, I disagree with it. I don't think it should be out there. Therefore, it's not really a problem that they don't feel comfortable expressing that in the classroom. And I think that's unfortunate.
And what it also does is reinforce for the people that are on campus, um, who are, making headlines protesting, because there are no stories about the silencing majority. It creates this permission structure and kind of reinforces that they are speaking for all students on campus. And so for a reader who is not like me and Frannie and calling up as many students as we can to try and see what they think, for a reader, you start to think, oh, wow, every single person at Columbia, Harvard, wherever it is, fill in the blank, thinks this way. And yes, a big majority, a concerning majority does, and they are the loudest. They are breaking into buildings, they are setting up encampments, but there are a lot of people at these schools who are fundamentally uncomfortable with those ideas, but there are immense sacrifices that they would have to make to kind of speak out about those things. And so I think the media coverage plays a lot into this, but it's kind of downstream of what's actually happening on these campuses.
Super interesting. So I'm curious. So I teach at USC, the School of Social Work, and we tend to hear the voices, obviously, that are the loudest. And those are the stories. I'm wondering, what stories do you both think are not getting enough attention or any attention?
There's so many. I mean, just out of curiosity, I went to a Columbia Middle Eastern Studies class the other day just to sit in on it. And the story that I was interested in seeing was how they were talking about about war with Iran, and if that would come up at all. And it didn't, but it was probably the most startling 90 minutes I've had in a long time. In the classroom, the professor literally did a chant and repeat. Colonization equals abuse of labor by capital times geography. Literally repeat after me, protest chants, essentially. And
Whoa.
so to me, it's less about, and there are instances like this every day. And I don't know if there's one story that is being undertold, but I do think there's a really deep misconception about how deep this rot goes. And I always see this study came out showing that Harvard enrollment is at an all-time low since World War II. And this is a school that has had Jewish quotas since its founding. But it frustrates me because I can't understand why people are surprised about that. This is a school that's shown consistently, despite any public statements they make, that they don't take those issues seriously. And so I think the story that I don't think is really hitting people is just, it is not just this one crazy professor or this one thing in class. It's it is a lot of these places to their core are not interested in civil discourse. It is not why they feel they are doing their job. So it comes down to who are the administrators? Who are the professors that you're giving tenure? What are the student groups that are getting the most support? But for me, just sitting in that class, I realized this is happening in every building across this campus, and that's pretty remarkable.
Mostly it's scary. When I hear you talk about it, as someone who is also in academia, I also see it everywhere, but also from student perspective. And that fear of speaking up is something that I see quite often for Jewish students and non-Jewish students. I mean, I do think we have allies and they're just afraid of speaking up. And I don't know if it's more a fear of consequences from the university and the administration because of the people you mentioned, Maya, are the leaders right now and they want to get a tenure and the money. Or is it fear of social backlash? Or, we've talked, Susie last season also, with a bunch of students who said, we lost so many friends because we were speaking up. And I wonder, Frannie, Maya, what do you think about it? What prevents people from coming forward and speaking up, especially students?
I think it's a combination of both of those things. So social backlash is absolutely front and center in the minds of many students. Is if I say this, will I lose my friends? Will I no longer be accepted in this club? Will I no longer, be able to go to this place that I've enjoyed or hang out with these people that I think are really cool? I think that is top of mind for many students on campus. And I think that bleeds into the classroom as well, because if I speak out in class and say this controversial opinion, all of a sudden that impacts my social life because really it's so intertwined in everything that I do on campus. At the same time, I also think it, also depends on professors. We've heard many stories and instances of students saying, listen, I was going to argue what I actually thought in this paper for class, but I knew I wasn't going to get a good grade. So if I just pretend to write exactly what I know the professor wants of me, I'm going to get a better grade. And honestly, I want good grades. So I do think it's a combination of both of those things you mentioned.
I also think, I mean, in my first semester of freshman year, I took a class, American Literature since 1945. And of course, somehow the relevant conversation was about Zionism. And this was in a discussion group with a tenured professor who I really adored. And we start talking about Israel, Palestine, and I speak up. And I really respectfully as I can say what I think, but I'm kind of alone. And, everyone disagrees with me. Okay. And after class, I'm asked to stay back by the professor. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna, there's gonna be like disciplinary action. Maybe she thought I was disrespectful, whatever it was. And during the discussion, she hadn't really said anything. And she says, I just wanted to tell you that I totally agree with you. And I think that this is one of the most misunderstood topics on campus. I'm just afraid of saying anything. So here you have a tenured professor who is afraid of a bunch of 18-year-old kids. And for me, that's kind of when I understood, like, okay, these are the rooms that I'm walking into. And I'm really going to have to be alone in this. And I have to be okay with the fact that, like, I will probably lose friends and party invites, and that's okay. But that's a calculation that I think a lot of students are having to make. And I used to be really frustrated with my friends who would say things to me in private rooms, or saying they agreed with me, sliding up on Instagram stories, I agree, and then never really saying anything out loud. But you have to remember, these are like 18, 19, 20-year-olds. They want to go to parties, they want to be cool, they want to have friends. When you think about the interviews we saw at the encampments where kids were asked, like, why are you here? A lot of those kids said, because my friends are here. What river to what sea? They don't know. It's about there's a real social element going on here. And you have to remember, these are kids that were in the COVID pandemic. They had a lot of loneliness and a lot of isolation. And so in a weird way, I think these kind of ideological movements have given people a big sense of belonging, and people are really craving that.
Maya, it's interesting. So my background is obviously in the extremism world, and one of the things that we're seeing is that when someone is looking for a sense of meaning, belonging, and identity, there's three big components that groomers are looking for. Like, they're looking for those vulnerabilities. And you mentioned COVID, and we do know that COVID played a huge role for those. I mean, they were teenagers back then. So we kind of seeing the results now of a very long grooming process that has been happening online and on college campuses, to the extreme of it. And it's scary. I mean, because your story about the professor really sits with me, because if we can have administration, if we can have the people in charge stepping up and taking the lead, it's really hard to expect it from, like you said, an 18 or a 19-year-old. And I'm thinking about both of you here sitting and being that voice. I mean, the courage that it must take from both of you, it's just admirable.
Well, the thing that actually makes me the most upset about that story is that the other students who heard the professor ask me to stay behind probably assumed, like I did, that I was being reprimanded.
Right.
And so you have this whole culture that's created really out of fear and of wanting to feel vindicated and searching for a sense of belonging. And to me, I was like, okay, fine, I can accept that this tenured professor is a total coward, fine. But the fact that my peers now also think that I was reprimanded, when in fact I was told that I was right, and that I was right to speak up, still to this day really upsets me, frankly.
It's super interesting. And yeah, it's so infuriating hearing your story. I have been even more intentional to incorporate critical thinking in my classes. And I've received pushback from inviting students to critically think and to take a different perspective, so that we can hold two stories with compassion, with humanity. And students are feeling, not all, but many students are feeling really frustrated to have to critically think.
I have a story about this actually from when I was in college. The hardest class I took in college, it was a constitutional law class. And the reason it was so hard wasn't because the content necessarily was that much harder than any other class I took. It was because the professor was so intentional about forcing us to grapple with other perspectives. He intentionally crafted these essay prompts for us, for example, that would challenge us to not be able to just write an essay based off of what the easy answer was because of a political persuasion we might have or not have. And that applied to anybody, no matter where the student was coming from. They were going to be challenged by the essay prompts he was creating. And I remember the class actually being notorious. Like, people were like, oh, don't take that class. Like, you'll never get an A. It's really, really hard. Don't do that. And then I took it and I'm like, wait, this is awesome. Like, yeah, it was really hard. Yeah, it wasn't the highest grade I got in college, but it was so much fun. It was so interesting. I learned so much more that has stuck with me now as an adult than any of the classes where I just wrote, memorized, or kind of, for example, wrote an essay based off of what I thought that the professor wanted to hear. And I do think that there is this sense on campus, and I'm sure that this sense exists today, where it's like, oh, if it's hard, we shouldn't do it. If it doesn't align then with exactly what I think, then it might be wrong, or it must be wrong and bad.
It also gets to like the fundamental question of what universities are meant to exist for. Like, is this institution meant to be a place where professors are teaching colonization chants? Or is this meant to be a place where we seriously contend with really hard ideas? And so I think just in a really fundamental way, we've just lost the plot. Like, we haven't instilled in people, or really in like the culture or in professors or in administrators, that the entire point of these expensive tuitions and 4 years of taking classes is not to train an ideologue. It is to graduate having contended with really serious ideas in a serious way and in a respectful way. So I think all of the things we're talking about are a little bit downstream of like, what is a university even for?
Yes. Such a good point. And I had a student who even said, do we have to take a different perspective? And, these students, and they're going to be therapists. These are students who want to be therapists. And I said, you are going to have clients that have different perspectives, and you cannot project your own. You have to hold space even with different views. How can we do that? And I'm wondering, do you both think things like bias reporting systems and speech policies are actually protecting students, or are they making people like more hesitant to speak?
I think it's absolutely the latter. I think groups like FIRE have spoken out against these types of speech codes, and they've been able to show real world examples in which these speech codes have actually come to potentially even like ruin a student's life, ruin professors' lives, board members. It's essentially creating this creepy anonymous reporting system where you can just try to ruin the life of somebody who you disagree with on certain issues. And I think at the end of the day, it's limiting speech and silencing people and scaring them from speaking out.
Yeah, and if the bar is offending someone, because every opinion has become so personal, and people have a hard time, wrestling with ideas rather than the people who think those ideas. If the bar is just offending someone, there are going to be 1,000 reports a day. So yeah, I don't think it's effective, and I think it instills, like you're saying, this culture where people get offended, and then the kid that said it gets called into someone's office, and I don't think it really does any good.
It's also validating the fact that, oh, if you're offended by this, then it is a bad idea, and it's wrong. And the idea is, and I think there's many people right now advocating for this, that kids need to be a little bit tougher. They need to be able to be offended by something and still be able to move on with their day and grapple with that.
And be friends with the person that offended them.
Yes.
At the end of the day, like, if you are only willing to be friends with the people you agree with everything on, you're not really going to have a lot of friends. Yeah.
Yes. I think that's the most important part, is how can we see the humanity in each other? And I have to be honest, before October 7th, I was in a whole different world. And then I am an October 8th Jew. And so once I sort of came out and I was seeing what was happening, I had so much more compassion for people with different views than me. Because I was like those people of like, you have to have the same views of me for it to be in my circle. Now I am hungry to hear different perspectives, if it's done with respect and compassion and curiosity, that we're actually listening to understand versus listening to respond.
I have to say also, like, embracing that perspective, I've had that similar journey. And embracing that perspective of, I actually want to understand why I disagree with this person. Like, I don't get it yet. It's so much fun.
Yes.
It's so much more freeing. One of the best parts of working at the Free Press is sitting in the office with everybody, and we're all disagreeing about stuff. And it's like, wait, I don't, why do you think that? I don't get that. Wait, why do you think that? I don't understand that. Wait, well, here's why I think this. And it's freeing. Like, you don't have to be scared that you're going to offend your colleague or have an HR violation against you because you expressed a viewpoint at work. It's actually, we're all learning from each other, and that's really cool.
I also think, like, when you realize how high the stakes are, you are willing to contend with any idea if you believe that engaging with it is in the service of, like, finding the true thing. And so at the Free Press, in an editorial meeting or a pitch meeting, like, we might be going back and forth and really disagreeing on something fundamental, but it's not because it's, like, about personal politics. It's all in the service of getting the best story or the best idea. And I think that's the same when it comes to even more contentious things like, any of the debates that we've been talking about. Like, I am willing to contend with to talk to someone who I have really different viewpoints from if we are both genuinely interested, not in being right, but in getting closer to what is true. That's how I feel about the university. And every university's logo says Veritas. The whole point is truth seeking. And I think that's really the entire point of civil discourse.
I think that's what we've lost. I mean, as I'm listening to actually all three of you, Susie, you as well, what I had this thought of, I work with a lot of universities about how to be a trauma-informed environment and hold students accountable for their academics, right? Because a lot of them like to say, oh, we're trauma-informed, we're safe for everybody. But at the end of the day, they're not. They're causing a lot of harm. And how to find that balance between being uncomfortable is actually a good thing. I always say to people when I give my talks, challenge me. Like, I'm only going to grow when I'm uncomfortable. And I mean, so you used to say last season, like, from discomfort, we grow, right? And at the same time, there's some situations when there is a real harm that needs to be named. There are groups that are being marginalized and minimized and traumatized. And finding that balance is really, really hard between I'm uncomfortable versus no, you're actually causing me harm. Because a lot of people will say, you heard me, I can't have this discussion. And I think what I hear the three of you saying, boots on the ground, is that if it's done in a way that is respectful, with compassion, and with clear curiosity, letting you with curiosity to engage in a dialogue where you learn from the other person, pausing for that, like pause for the cause, and not just to make your point clear, that is the essence of that. And when I think about it, and Maya, you spoke about Harvard before, and when I think about Ivy League University, do you think they're shaping or they're trying to shape this reality, or is it actually the other way around when it comes to this type of dialogues and issues?
So I think that a lot of the culture that we're seeing on campus right now, the lack of discourse is coming from the top. And I'll give another personal example of this. When I think I was a sophomore or junior in college at the time. That was when the verdict on Kyle Rittenhouse's case came out in Wisconsin. And this was the guy who had gone to a protest and he had shot and killed somebody during the protest. He claimed it was self-defense. Like, I'm actually not that familiar with the main details of the case, but a lot of people will be aware of it because it was a big cultural moment in the country as well. And the jury verdict came back and he was acquitted. And obviously, that was a very controversial decision, especially for people on the left. They were very upset about that. I remember at the time, again, I was a public policy student. The head of our public policy school sent an email to the entire student body decrying the verdict and saying that it was a miscarriage of justice. And at the time, again, like, I didn't even have a very strong opinion about the verdict. I didn't know the details of the case. But I remember thinking, like, that's kind of weird to me that I have somebody in charge of the public policy school at my university coming out and basically saying this is a miscarriage of justice. The jury system has failed us in America. The American judicial system is essentially broken. And at that moment, that was kind of one of those aha moments for me of that. To me, feels like the university setting an agenda of what they think is right and wrong versus creating a space for students to debate that and talk about that, and for there to be an openness for students to disagree or agree and to grapple with the complexity of what that verdict meant, for example. Like, that could have been a really interesting opportunity for the policy school to host a debate or conversation or a forum for people to grapple with how they felt about it. But that's not the decision they chose to make.
I also think, and I think we saw this really clearly with the federal funding cuts among some of these universities. And we talk a lot about like the institution. Something that we talk a lot about the free press is like institutions are people. At the end of the day, it is not some faceless bureaucracy. At the end of the day, it is someone at a desk who is looking at, the speech reports or deciding which professors to hire. And so I think we have to remember you can cut funding for cancer research, and you can say like the institution is committed to fixing these. But if the same people are in the same rooms, incentivized by the same things, and then making the same decisions, it doesn't matter. So I think like exactly to Frannie's point in that story is these are people with really clear opinions who do change the way these campus cultures operate.
Yeah, 100%. So then that is a perfect transition to the next question is, if you could point to a few changes, cultural or policy, that would actually improve open dialogue, what would they be?
Well, on top of that story I just shared, actually, one thing I would like to see happen more at universities is for universities to adopt institutional, basically saying that on any given issue, we're not going to give an institutional voice to how we feel about it. We're going to instead be the marketplace of ideas, be the space where students and faculty are going to engage with these difficult questions. Ultimately, to me, it sounds pretty simple, but that is the university going back to what I think its core mission should be, which is, as Maya said earlier so well, truth seeking. So that's what I would like to see happen more. We actually have seen that happening more in the past few years, which I think is a good thing. But it's also kind of the proof is in the pudding, right? So what an institution says versus what it does is very different. And even though we've seen more universities adopting institutional neutrality, we still have 166 universities, according to FIRE, who are getting an F grade. So I don't think we're quite there yet, but that is a step in the right direction, in my opinion.
Okay. And our last question, we're asking everybody that. We always like to end on a personal note. So I'm going to ask each one of you, what is one thing you're going to do for your own healing and self-care this week? Because you're fighting the fight, both of you. Maya, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think something I've noticed just the longer that I've been a journalist is that we're not like meant to be scrolling on Twitter all day looking at really horrific graphic things. You spoke about the Charlie Kirk instance, and I remember in that moment thinking, we're not meant to see someone's like head blown off in slow-mo over and over and then watching it in close up for a fact check. Like that is really damaging and hard. So I have been trying. I'm not super religious. I don't, turn my phone off for Shabbat. I'm trying to get there, but I do just try and do my own version of Shabbat, which for me is just on Saturday, I really try and not go on Twitter or look at, graphic headlines or read scary stories. And that one day is really, really helpful and beneficial just to like touch grass and remember that there is life outside of, all of the scary things that are important to work on.
Love that.
I have a similar answer to Maya, actually. Maya and I have spent the last few months also reporting together on the harms of social media, specifically in young people, and many of the lawsuits being brought against social media companies right now. And since we started reporting on those stories, I've actually tried to be a lot more intentional about not scrolling as much. And I do think when I'm less on my phone, when I'm not scrolling, when I'm not stuck in that doom loop, I'm so much more productive. I'm so much happier. So my goal to take care of myself this week is, instead of looking at my phone, go on a walk outside, enjoy some sunshine, beautiful weather, maybe read a paper book, like a physical book, those types of things. So going back to the basics, that's how I try to, as Maya kind of put it as well, stay sane in an insane world.
Yeah, I have appreciated talking with you both on so many levels, just because you are truth seekers. I mean, this is what you were doing even before October 7th. So I appreciate it so much. And Maya, I think I'm going to take what you said because I'm trying to incorporate more culture into my life. And I love the I'm going to try not to look at my phone as much on Saturdays. I mean, obviously I can't give it up 100, but I'm not going to scroll on Saturdays. I'm still going to look at my phone, which I think is realistic. So yeah, I appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold you to that, Susie.
I feel like
Thank you both so much for being with us. We really appreciate this conversation.
Thanks for having us.
we'd like to thank the Academic Engagement Network for their generous support, music designer Ivan Reyes, podcast coordinator Chandler O'Reilly, and to all of our listeners. Today's episode is co-produced by Associate Professor Susie Hess and Dr. Mary Barr Halpern.
Our Stories Matter, Campus Voices, Civil Engagement in an Era of Division, is brought to you by Trauma Informed Learning Alliance. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram and our website at traumainformedla.org.
Please give us 5 stars on iTunes so more people can have access, and donate to traumainformedla.org so we can keep healing through our storytelling episodes.